Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boy, does it smell good.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
That's good.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio, this is Hunt Palmer.
Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday. If you know what day of the week it is, we're working off of a Thursday idea here, although it's just been a crazy week down here in South Louisiana. Had the holiday on Monday, a couple days off for the winter weather, and we're back in action here on this Thursday. Means we're brought to you by Rouse. It's got Jacob Beck and Cassie Pizzali back there on the ones and twos. If you are working today, appreciate you hanging out with us. If you're still at home or working from home or taking some time away, thanks for making us part of your time away. We'll get you to 3 o'clock here on the Hunt Palmer Show. We got tons to do. We're going to talk about LSU's new addition to its coaching staff here in 15 minutes. I've still got some thoughts on the college football playoff final, which is played between now and when we last left you on Monday. Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints and LouisianaSports.net, is going to come aboard at 2 o'clock to talk about the Saints and where they go from here on their coaching hire. I've got thoughts on that coming up here shortly. Chris Blair, Voice of the Tigers, at 2:15. And Fox Sports, 10 best college football teams over the last 25 years. Where do the 2019 Tigers come in? We'll do all that over the next 2 hours. Appreciate you locking us in here. I guess before we start, let's just talk about the snow day. Beck, how'd the ducks do? Did they have enough water? Are the chickens okay? What's the word from the Casa de Beck? And is your wife home or is she stuck somewhere?
No, she was supposed to fly out to Orlando for work on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. She moved that flight up to Monday, and she eventually got there. So she is still in Orlando. She wasn't supposed to be flying back till Saturday anyway. So she's fine. The house is fine. The ducks and chickens are all good.
The ducks and chickens are good.
The ducks were, I sent you a video. They went outside into the snow and then immediately went back in because it was cold. But then after that, they eventually went out and enjoyed a little bit of time in the snow. So they were fine. The chickens did not want any part of it. So they just kind of stayed in their coop. In the coop. Yeah, they stayed in the coop the whole day. So it was a good time though, man. We're everybody's still safe and sound at the house. So we're good.
What does a Home Alone husband whose wife's gone do when he's snowed in? Do you go play in the snow? Do you just watch movies all day and not do anything? Like what are you doing?
Actually, we actually have a decent amount of friends that we've even known before we moved into our house that live on the same street as us. So I knew a lot of people. So everybody kind of just went out and walked around the neighborhood and then saw the sights and had some kids. They have some kids, so they were playing in the snow. And then we walked down to Olympia Stadium where they have the Breck Park over there. And we're sliding around on some makeshift sleds, if you will.
I saw pool floaties out there, cardboard boxes. I saw crawfish boil trays being used.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Anything anybody could use. Nobody had this. Actually, I saw one sled.
I don't know. How did you even get a sled?
It was
here?
in New Orleans. A buddy of mine in New Orleans, and they had an actual sled, which I'd never seen a sled.
New Orleans, by the way, got a ton. They got like more snow than we did, which is crazy.
They did. I mean, there was some. The official report I saw today was 10 inches. There was somewhere in the neighborhood of that at my house. So we prepped Myers on Monday night like it's going to snow tomorrow. He knows Frosty the Snowman.
Okay.
He knows about building a snowman. So we prepped him for that. So he woke up and said, guess what? It's snowing. Okay. So we walk out at 8 o'clock in the morning. He slept real late, like 8 o'clock. And he looks out. So we are like, got to get dressed. And I texted Alyssa on Monday afternoon. I was like, we need gloves. Like we don't have any gloves. He has gardening gloves because he likes to pull weeds.
That's not going to cut it in the snow.
No. So he goes out there, and Alyssa is working virtually. I had already written 2 stories, so I was free for about an hour that I could go out there. He walked out into the snow, and it was snowing pretty hard at that point. It was cold, and like he had the beanie on and the hoodie on, but the gloves weren't doing a lot. He played for like 8 minutes unenthusiastically. And I was trying to like pack a snowman together, but at that point it was all powder. We couldn't really do anything with it. And he kind of got sick of it. We put clothes back on at like 11:30 to go back out, and then again at like 4 to go back out when it had quit snowing. and he just didn't get it and didn't want to do it.
Not about it.
So yesterday, me and Myers woke up in pajamas, worked the whole day, and then he watched TV most of the day. And we took a bath, and I took a shower at like 6. Took those pajamas off and put the next pajamas on. We did not even put clothes on yet. We didn't even attempt to go out yesterday. So it was a poor job by us of not having gloves ready for him. But I just don't think he was into it anyway. He's not going to remember this. He's only 3, and I feel like it's maybe once in a lifetime for me to have that much snow on the ground.
Yeah, probably so.
But we just kind of enjoyed sitting there doing much of nothing. It was not a lot of activity at the Palmer house over the last 2 days. But now we're back in action. He won't even go. He was so scarred yesterday. The snow on the street had melted, and I was trying to get him out of the house. Like, let's go ride your bike.
Yeah.
Let's go. And he's just, no. We're watching Blaze. We're doing nothing. So not a lot of activity, not a lot of like magical moments for the Palmers. I thought it was ridiculous and amazing to see the snow. The one thing we did do a good job of, we had the food on hand. So we had gumbo on Tuesday, which is incidentally my birthday. I don't think I'll forget that one anytime soon. And then yesterday we put a pot roast on at like 8 in the morning, and the house smelled awesome all day. So that was good. The outside activities, not a lot going on at Casa de Palmer over the last 2 weeks. But glad to be back here, and hopefully everybody had a good couple of days away in the snow. All right, let's start now, the way we start every single day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
So since we last left you, there have been some movement in the NFL. Ben Johnson has been named the the head coach of the Chicago Bears. We knew that on Monday when we were with you, but also the Jets have filled their vacancy with Aaron Glenn. Those were the 2 hottest names on the circuit for the NFL, and Glenn was certainly connected to the Saints. I don't know if the travel was an issue from him getting from New York to New Orleans in the middle of that snow. I don't know why he did leave the Jets facility without agreeing to that deal, but when it was said that he was going to meet with the Jets on Monday and then with the Saints on Tuesday or Wednesday, you felt like if he leaves the Jets facility without an agreement, the Saints will have a chance to make their pitch. And he did leave the facility, but he never got to New Orleans. And so the Jets make Aaron Glenn their guy. So where does that leave New Orleans at this point? Well, obviously, you've got Joe Brady, who we believe the Saints to be interested in. We believe them to have had a video interview with him. He's still playing in the AFC playoffs as the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. He cannot meet with the Saints in person until that season is over. So very, very firmly put him in the possibilities list. Mike McCarthy is the other name. It was said that he was interested in that Bears opening. I think a lot of people in Chicago, based on what I was listening to and seeing on Twitter, felt like McCarthy had a real chance to get that job. And I don't know how excited they were about that, but they felt like it was a real possibility. Obviously, that's not going to happen with Ben Johnson becoming the head coach there. So McCarthy, who has talked to the Saints very much in the possibilities camp, they've had some other interviews with Weaver and with Kafka, and you kind of look around and you feel like you're down to about 4 names that have been announced and that we know about. And it feels like, to me, that McCarthy and Brady are out in front. We'll talk to Ross Jackson coming up a little bit later, and he feels like Joe Brady is the guy. And one of the things that is going to be a talking point if Joe Brady gets this job is his age. He's very, very young. He was super young when he came to LSU and helped engineer the greatest offense in the history of college football. And then he went to Carolina, and now he's been in Buffalo. And I think, well, is he too young to take the reins of an organization? You've had some very, very mature men in Sean Payton for the last 15 years and Dennis Allen after that have been through a lot of NFL wars as your head coach for a long time. Joe Brady is much younger than those guys, but he's not wildly young at all when you consider what has happened in the NFL, really not over the last 10 years, over the course of the last 50 years. Brady's not an outlier in terms of his age. Joe Brady is 35 years old. That's just not all that young. When you think of young head coaches, of course, you immediately go to Sean McVay, who took the Rams job at 30. And then Mike McDaniel feels like he's pretty young, but he took the Dolphins job at 38. Kyle Shanahan was hired at 37. Zach Taylor was 35 when he took the Bengals job. Those guys are all a little bit older than Joe Brady when he could get this job. But consider some of the other coaches. It's not just this new wave of young offensive minds that have been hired as young people. There have been young people hired throughout the course of time, and some of them had a ton of success in the NFL. Mike Tomlin got the Steelers job at 34. That's younger than Joe Brady right now. Bill Cowher got the Steelers job at 34. That's younger than Joe Brady is right now. John Gruden got the Raiders job at 34, younger than Joe Brady is right now. Let's go further back. John Madden got the Raiders job at 32. Don Shula got a head job with the Colts at 33. Now, those are all successful endeavors and great coaches and Hall of Fame coaches in some sense, Super Bowl winning coaches. And there are some that haven't worked out. I mean, Eric Mangini got the Jets job at 34. Josh McDaniels, 32 years old when he was hired. Lane Kiffin was 31 when the Raiders gave him a shot. Mike Shanahan was hired by the Raiders at 35 years old. So this is not new. It's not a new wave. It's not something that's foreign. This has been going on for decades. 35 is very much in the mix. He's got a little bit of a baby face, and he's been a little behind the curtains. I think far more concerning is the wrong word. Far more a talking point that we can have as opposed to age is, okay, is he prepared to lead an organization? Because that's different than age. That's just maturity level and aptitude. And you know that if you hire Mike McCarthy, he can do that. Like, there is a pretty high floor with Mike McCarthy. I don't think Mike McCarthy would take the reins of the Saints and completely be overwhelmed and drive it into a ditch. Like, that's not a possibility. It may not work. He may win 7 or 8 games most of the time, and you never play for anything of significance. But he's not going to be overwhelmed, and he can handle things. There's a possibility, a greater possibility, that Joe Brady could walk in and just not be prepared to have the job. That really doesn't have anything to do with his age. That has everything to do with his experience, and everybody's got to get their first chance once. Obviously, Joe Brady was in the middle of a really, really good organization in New Orleans for that short time he was there on the offensive side as a support staff guy. Obviously, he coached elite players at LSU and was a big help in that offensively. And if you give him the reins of an MVP-level quarterback, he can score a ton of points because that's what he did at the end of last year as an interim as the offensive coordinator for the Bills, and that's what he's done this year and still has the Bills playing with 4 teams left in the NFL playoffs. But running the organization, making hires, making decisions in game, all those types of things, and building culture, he's never done. McCarthy has. But age is not really going to be a talking point here. That's just not all that relevant. You're talking about, I just named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 guys that have been younger or right about his age that have been hired throughout the course of time. So he was a young hot shot when LSU hired him in this market when we first were introduced to Joe Brady. Keep in mind, that was 6 years ago. So that's a lot of maturity that goes on. When you're in your 20s, you are a young guy. Mid-30s, it's a little interesting to me, and this is just a personal thing, that the new head coach of the Saints could be younger than me. That's a little weird. But he's clearly a quality football coach, and I think a guy that presents an exciting option. It's just, do you want to go with the volatile boomer bust type unproven hire? Do you want to go with kind of the steady older presence? That's something we're not going to find out until the Saints make this hire. But as I said back on Monday, if the Saints hire a coach this week, it'll be Aaron Glenn. If the Saints don't hire a coach this week, I think it's Joe Brady. We now know that the Saints are not hiring Aaron Glenn, and the clock's ticking on whether or not it's this week. There's probably better than a 50% chance that Joe Brady is not coaching the Bills next week. I would suggest there's a better than 50% chance the Chiefs win that game in Arrowhead. I give the Bills a real chance to win it, but that is probably what we're waiting on here for the Saints. I don't know that they're in a rush to make sure they run to the podium and hire the fired coach in McCarthy, or one of the coaches who's not coaching anything right now, that you're talking about Kafka, you're talking about Weaver. Brady's kind of what you're waiting for here. That's the domino that can't fall until they lose, which could be 3 weeks, it could be 3 days. But age, not really worth discussing, in my opinion, at this point. That's our Genesis opening drive. Genesis, every car on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. We'll step aside. LSU is reported to make a staff hire and addition on an underserved part of the football. We'll talk about that coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com is that website. Every car on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. Safety is important, obviously. And it's important to the folks at Genesis. And that's why every single car on the line of vehicles was given the IIHA top safety pick, and every model in the line from the entry level to the highest end model comes with the same baseline safety features. That's not a spot where they're willing to cut any corners. Get behind the wheel. You can feel the comfort. You can see the style. You can feel the ease with its drive, and you can see all the bells and whistles that they've got over there on a brand new Genesis. The safety is something that you need to do a little research on, and it's all right there in front of you. Genesis is as safe a car as there is on the road. And they've also got some perks when you buy a Genesis, including a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. Get on by and see them now that the roads are safe to drive on. Airline at Pico. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. Airline at Pico. They're fairly new in that location. Probably driven by it a bunch of times, but may have never seen it off to the side there. It's across from Women's Hospital. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. Check them out online, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
Thursday show is brought to you by Rouse's. Maybe running a little low on groceries after the last couple of days of being cooped up in the house. If you're looking to get out and get ready for the weekend, Rouse is a great option to pick up all your grocery items. That includes king cakes, by the way. They're gonna have king cakes. They've got plenty of king cakes. They're going to bake 600,000 of them during Carnival season this year. Of course, we're right in the middle of Carnival season. You can smell that gourmet cinnamon dough throughout the entire store. They make traditional king cakes. They make the filled king cakes, and they've got specialty king cake flavors that are new every single year, including this year. I was checking out Rouse's Burbank and Lee back on Friday when I was in there last, and they had the strawberry, they had the blueberry, they had, of course, the cinnamon cream cheese filling as well. If you're looking for your king cake, whether it's just to have on the kitchen counter during this time of year or you're heading to a party, you get together of some sort, get on by Rouse's. They've always got enough king cake for you to walk right in, grab one, and get on your way. There's been a lot of shakeup over at LSU in terms of special teams over the last week. We got the word late last week that LSU was losing Bob Diaco to North Carolina, where he was going to join Bill Belichick's staff. For those not familiar with Diaco's role at LSU over the last few seasons, he's been an analyst, so not a position coach or a coordinator, but he's been as involved as anybody on the special team side of things. When we were out in preseason camp, Diaco was running all the special teams drills with punting, field goal kicking, the return teams, all that. Diaco's right in the middle of it. He's one of the guys that LSU allots for me to interview as a position coach over the course of the pregame shows for 13 games. So an analyst that was a little bit more forward than just the guys who sit back and break down tape and scribble notes down. He's very much involved in all that. We talked to Xavier Thomas a couple times during the season about the return game, and Bob Diaco's down there and he's working the iPad and they're figuring some things out special teams wise. In name, he was not LSU special teams coordinator, but very much Bob Diaco was right in the middle of all of LSU's special teams situations. Slade Nagel was initially given that title. He was actually more of the tight ends coach and now moved on to Houston to be the offensive coordinator. So either way you slice it, you want to talk about the guy who kind of had the title in name. You want to talk about the analyst who was kind of involved more at practice. Either way, LSU's special teams brain trust has moved on. So you got to fill that one way or another. And Football Scoop last night reported that LSU is making an addition to its staff with an eye on special teams, and that is by bringing in Grambling special teams coordinator Aman Anad, who has spent time as a special teams assistant at Penn State and Baylor and was at Grambling this past season. Incidentally, when he was at Penn State, the Nittany Lions led the Big Ten in blocked kicks when he was there. Not a guy that is new to coaching at all. He's actually been coaching since he was a student assistant back at Old Dominion in 2011. So he's been been at this nearly 15 years. And so I don't have any word, and Football Scoop did not mention in their piece whether or not he would be a true special teams coordinator, which LSU could theoretically hire and then put an analyst over there to help with tight ends, or whether he's going to kind of fill the Diaco role where you're talking about a guy who is very much hands-on with the special teams, very much handling that side of things, but is not an official coordinator, is more of a support staff role. That's just a decision Brian Kelly's going to make. When you decide you're going to have a safeties coach and a cornerbacks coach instead of a secondary coach, and then you're going to have a defensive line coach and an edge rushers coach, which LSU has both of those, you're going to have to cut something somewhere as far as on-field official assistants go. And right now, over the past 2 years, LSU has decided to do that from a special teams perspective. We'll see what the future holds for Coach Aman Anand. Either way, LSU's got to be better on special teams. This is a team that was, in the 2024 season, 126th out of 134. There were only about 9 teams worse than LSU as far as punting average. Now, that's not net punting average. It wasn't like LSU got gashed in the punt return game, but LSU had one punt that went 50 yards this year. LSU finished at a 39.6 yard per punt average. Again, that's just not good enough. You're down there with UL Monroe, Florida International, Northern Illinois, Texas State, UTEP, Troy. This is the company you're keeping as far as punting the ball goes, and there's no reason for that. Now, I don't blame that on Bob Diaco and or Slade Nagel and some kind of analyst. That's the punters just not doing an awesome job at hanging the ball high and kicking it a long way. You've now gone out and got Chadwick, who's a punter that was an all-conference selection in Conference USA last year at Middle Tennessee State. Hopefully, he brings you a little bit more. He had a big leg this year. He's 6'3", and routinely kicked the ball further than 60 yards this year, or last year, I should say, I guess, at this point, at Middle Tennessee. I wrote a portal profile piece on him on LouisianaSports.net. He seems to be maybe a little bit more talented. You had Jay Bramlett do a really nice job the first 2 years under Brian Kelly. You tried to split those duties this year with Peyton Todd and Blake Oxendorf, and one was doing pooch kicks, and one was doing longer kicks, and one was doing the rugby kicks, and it was just kind of a hodgepodge of mediocrity. And we saw that in September, and we saw it again, well, August, I guess it was, and we saw it really the continuation of the season. Again, I don't put that all on the special teams coach, and then certainly LSU had some highlights from a special teams perspective. You did a great job in the return game. Xavier Thomas was awesome. You returned kicks for touchdowns in consecutive games, the bowl game, and then obviously the game against Oklahoma in Tiger Stadium in the regular season finale. That was Aaron Anderson and Xavier Thomas that did that. I thought LSU did a good job in the return game all year. You've got a solid kicker in Damian Ramos who did a good job for you. You're knocking kicks out of the end zone every single time out there on the kickoff perspective, which is fantastic to see. So there are some positives for LSU from a special teams perspective. I don't think they were an abject disaster like they were in Brian Kelly's first year, where you couldn't handle a punt, couldn't handle a kickoff. You're getting offsides on kickoffs. You're getting poor tackling in the return game. Like, everything they did was bad. Certainly getting an extra point block to lose a game, chief among those. Nothing like that this year to me. But I do think that it's important that you have a good set of eyes on special teams. You brought in a guy who, yeah, I tell you that he comes from Grambling, and you automatically roll your eyes like, why are we hiring a coach from the SWAC? That doesn't make any sense. But you realize that he's a younger guy. He spent some time at Baylor and Penn State. So the bright lights in the big-time college football is not completely foreign to him. Now he'll come in. It's just a matter of what role he takes on at LSU. You've got plenty of athletes at LSU to be really, really, really good on special teams. That should be a focus for LSU. And quite frankly, if you're going to try to compete for championships, hidden yards, field position, execution at a high level, it's got to matter across the board. You're trying to be the difference between a 6-6 team or a 7-5 team or an 8-4 team. Well, who really cares? You got to just play a little bit better. But if you're trying to beat the best teams in the country in the Southeastern Conference, and you're trying to do so week in and week out, you got to be better on special teams than LSU certainly was punting the ball this year. You bring in some new talent, you bring in a new coach, and we'll see whether or not LSU can improve their special teams moving forward. So that's your news of the day in LSU football. If you're looking for our football content, you can find it at Hunt on LSU on YouTube, or certainly wherever you find your podcast. Just search Hunt on LSU. It's all LSU football all year round. So you're not going to get hoops content there. You're not going to get baseball content there. It's all football all the time. It's Hunt on LSU over on YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. So seek that out. Like, subscribe, rate, and view. We certainly do appreciate it. Nick Saban said the biggest mistake of his career was leaving LSU. By now, you've probably heard that over the last couple of days based on Ryan Clark's podcast, The Pivot. I'll tell you what my thoughts are on that coming up at 1:45. I also wrote about it over at LouisianaSports.net if you want to go find my column there under the LSU tab. When we come back, it has been 3 days, I understand, but they did play a football game back on Monday night that we haven't talked about. So let's talk about college football playoff final and what that means for Ohio State, for the 12-team college football playoff, and even the LSU side of things. We'll talk about that coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio Video Security Solutions, avssla.com is that website. It's not going to be snowing forever around here. Spring is actually going to come pretty quickly, and that's a time where a lot of people like to spend time outdoors. If you do like to spend time outdoors and you'd like to improve your outdoor situation, whether it's an audio situation or a home viewing situation with a television, Mitchell Fisher and his team at Audio Video Security Solutions are happy to help you out with all of that. If you want to put in some surround sound or just some high-quality speakers outside because you love to spend some time at the outdoor kitchen or just playing in the backyard, if you've got a pool and you want a situation where you can watch TV from there, they can hook you up at Audio Video Security Solutions. The phone number I give you is Mitchell Fisher's phone number. He's the owner of the company. You're getting the owner's number. That's a pretty good point person to have when it comes to customer service. His number is 225-439-7920. Again, it's 225-439-7920. Call Mitchell and tell him what you want. He'll come out. They'll give you that consultation. He'll look around and show you what they can do for you. You can also contact them online at avssla.com. It's Audio Video Security Solutions, avssla.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
All right, we've covered the local angles with football, with the Saints coaching search, and then LSU hiring a new special team staffer. We got to get to the national stuff that we saw on Monday night. Ohio State wins the national championship game over Notre Dame. 34-23 was the final in this one. I previewed it on Monday. I said, look, I think Ohio State is significantly a bit more talented than Notre Dame. I think they've got a much better offense than Notre Dame. I don't think Notre Dame's going to be able to line up and just run the ball on Ohio State and 3 yards in a cloud of dust their way to fight and scrap and claw and stay in it and then win it late. I don't see them being able to do that against a much more talented team. I like Ohio State. I think I picked it 30-17. And it was interesting to watch this game play out because you saw Notre Dame's game plan right there on the first drive. You saw really the only punch Notre Dame could throw. I said on Monday, like, their only chance is to win the turnover battle 3-0 and to try to junk up the football game. And they came out on that first drive and they executed to perfection. They went 3 yards at a time. They picked up a couple of fourth downs. They ran 9 minutes and 45 seconds off the clock. It took 75 yards on 18 plays for a touchdown. That's as good as Notre Dame can do, and that's really their only chance. They were never going to be able to be as explosive as Ohio State. They were never going to be able to keep up with Ohio State, but if they could keep the reins on the game and try to keep the game around 25 points, maybe there's a chance. But what you saw after that drive that Notre Dame went on, you saw Ohio State go 75 yards on 11 plays, touchdown, 76 yards on 10 plays, touchdown, 80 yards on 12 plays, touchdown, 75 yards on 5 plays, touchdown. Like, Notre Dame just could not stop Ohio. They could not cover Ohio State. Will Howard was like 13 of 14 at one point. That's supposed to be the strength of this Notre Dame team, is the great secondary. And Ohio State kind of got whatever they wanted when they wanted it. And you look up, and at a certain point, okay, it's 31-7. 31-7. That's when a bunch of my friends turned it off. I still got the game on. I'm paying attention. And Notre Dame kept fighting, and they actually took some shots down the field, and they made some plays. Like Greathouse got going. He had 2 catches for over 30 yards for touchdowns, and they made it an interesting game. And I just vehemently disagree with Marcus Freeman's decision to try to kick that short field goal in the fourth quarter. You're down 16 points. You've got the ball on the 9-yard line. You need 2 touchdowns and 2 2-point conversions. Even if you kick the field goal and make it, you still need to score 2 touchdowns. And I just don't love your chances of getting there by giving the ball away when you're already on the 9-yard line. No, I hate Riley Leonard's chances of converting on 4th and 9 from the 9. I don't think he's good at all. He's good at running for 4 yards, and that doesn't work on 3rd and 9. So I don't like your chances of it, but that's your only chance. Like, that's your only chance. Cutting it to 13 and then giving the ball back to an Ohio State offense that's ramming it down your throat, it doesn't seem like a very good opportunity for you. And it turns out they don't even cut it to 13 because they missed the field goal. And then your defense does bow its neck and get a stop, and your offense does go down there and get the touchdown to Greathouse. So you are able to cut it to 8, and you give Ohio State the ball back, and you can't get the stop you need, which probably wasn't going to happen. Your only real chance there was to go for the 8 points with 9 minutes to go to get as close as you can. Because at least at that point, if they go down and get a field goal, it's still only 11, and then you don't need 2 touchdowns. There just wasn't enough time for Notre Dame to try to plod along at that point. You got to go get it. You're not as good as them. You've got to go get it. And Marcus Freeman did so many things that were so good all season long. He got his team to respond to the terrible loss against Northern Illinois. He got them to run the table there. They dominated some teams that were scrappy upstarts like Army and Navy. They took care of their business defensively and beat Indiana. They go to the Superdome and they played a really good game against Georgia. It's always going to be a caveat to me because the backup quarterback played for the other team, but still, it's still Georgia. They still got a lot of 4 and 5 stars out there, and Notre Dame went down there and won the game. And then you weren't as good as Penn State, but you played tough. You overcame some turnovers. You never gave in. You overcame a deficit like he did. And then you did the great thing where you ran the team on there against Georgia, and that looked great from a coaching perspective. And like there's so many things to be positive with Marcus Freeman about over the course of this season. But at the biggest moment, that fake punt sucked, and the decision not to go for the touchdown on 4th and goal from the 9, it's not 4th and 26 from your own 5. It's 4th and goal from the 9. You have to complete a pass. And they needed to go for that and go for the 2-point conversion at that point. They didn't, and they basically ran out of time because they weren't going to be able to slow Ohio State down enough over those last 9 minutes. So I thought that there were some really questionable calls by Marcus Freeman, but ultimately the best team in the sport won it. And I think that's more likely to happen in this format than the format we had previously. And I think that college football generally crowns the best team. But when you're always going to let the best team in a 12-team playoff. And then their chances of going out there and winning are really good. And Ohio State wouldn't have gotten in the BCS format, and they wouldn't have gotten in the 4-team playoff format. And they're in this format. And everybody felt like they were probably the best team, and it just took them a long time to show that. You can suggest as a college football fan that that's bad, that they were let off the hook for losing a terrible game to Michigan. You could say that that game doesn't mean anything anymore. You can say that, any negative you want to say about what Ohio State did this year, and the fact that they still emerged as national champions, is your right to say that. I personally, as I've said many times, I like the fact that more games across the country mattered in November. I like the fact that we were watching cool settings with big-time brands in big-time stadiums like Tennessee and Ohio State and Clemson and Texas and Notre Dame. We're watching all those teams play in great home venues and great bowl sites, and I didn't think it lasted too long. I was perfectly fine with the entire process, and I'm okay with the fact that Ohio State is the national champion, even though they completely laid an egg in their game against Michigan. Like, I'm okay with that. I understand the other side of the coin, but I think it's good to let teams try to figure it out on the field. And I'm okay with Ole Miss winning a baseball national championship after being atrocious for a month of conference play. And I'm okay with this Ohio State team becoming the national champions, even though they had one really tough game at Oregon and then just a disaster against Michigan. I thought they were the best team. I thought they earned it. And I feel today, looking back at this college football season, kind of like I think you generally feel at the end of the NBA playoffs. We're like, yeah, it takes a long time. But there's a lot of drama, and the best team usually comes out on top. In the NBA, it's really hard for the lesser team to win 4 out of 7. And in college football, you let the better team in and you give them an opportunity to go play. A lot of times they're going to find their way through that playoff. And Ohio State got that done. As far as Notre Dame goes, I think that they are still in a similar spot that they've been in for 15, 18 years. They've got a good team. They've got some 4-star recruits. They've got some guys that are going to play in the NFL. I don't think their top-end talent stands up to the elite level in college football. I think they're going to have a hard time winning a national championship, but they're a good football team, and they deserve to be where they were. And they got annihilated for 3 quarters and played a real scrappy 4th quarter, and it's not enough. And that's kind of what I thought Notre Dame was when we entered this thing. So Ohio State wins the championship. I'm sure their fans now can stop gnashing their teeth over the Michigan situation. Doesn't really matter that much. But that's just the way that they felt their entire lives, because you couldn't get where you were trying to go without going through Michigan, and now you can. And that's the same thing for Duke and North Carolina basketball. It's now the same thing in the Iron Bowl. It's more common in sports to be able to drop a game here and there to your rival and still be able to accomplish some things. And Ohio State proved that this season. Beck, I'm sure you were watching this one. Anything that I've said that stands out as being really dumb, or was that just a brilliant segment by me breaking down the state of college football in this game?
I think it's a great observation.
Thanks,
there you
Coach
go,
McMahon. Appreciate that very much, Coach McMahon, giving me the goods there. Speaking of Coach McMahon, they play coming up on Saturday against Alabama. We'll talk to Chris Blair about that 30 minutes from right now. We'll chat with Ross Jackson coming up here in 15 minutes or so as the Saints continue this look towards their next head coach. What's next for the Black and Gold, and is the weather been a deterrent for this team trying to hire a new head coach? We'll talk to Ross coming up at straight up 2 o'clock. I wrote a column for LouisianaSports.net on Wednesday morning that kind of talked about Nick Saban saying the biggest mistake he ever made was leaving LSU. And I think there are some layers to that comment. I think there's some context that needs to be provided, and in my opinion, on kind of what he means by all of that. So we'll talk a little bit about that to close out hour number 1 coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. They're the best in the business. It doesn't always have to be a full-scale renovation. Those can be intimidating, both from just the scope of work, the amount of time that you could be out of your home or unable to access part of your home. And of course, the cost of that can be a little prohibited to some people when you're talking about a full-scale renovation. Now, One Bath and Closets can do them. And if you're looking for that, give them a call and they're happy to help you with it. But it doesn't always have to be a full-scale renovation. It can be something as simple as a tub-to-shower conversion. That's something they do all the time. If you don't use your bathtub, get rid of it. Put in a glass walk-in shower from the folks at One Bath and Closets. Changes the look of your bathroom, changes the functionality of your bathroom, and adds some value to your home as well. It starts with a free consultation. You go to onebathandclosets.com, you reach out to David. He comes out and they show you what they can do for you. If financing is something you're interested in, 18 months, 0% if you qualify. It's all there at One Bath and Closets. You can find them online at onebathandclosets.com, onebathandclosets.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
I think most of you who are listening to this show today, in one way, shape, or form, heard or read or saw Nick Saban's comments to Ryan Clark on the pivot It's a long form interview that he and Saban sat down for the Pivot, and one of the things that came out of it was Saban saying the biggest professional mistake he ever made was leaving LSU to go to the Dolphins. Now, I think if you're the most romantic LSU fan, you can say he knows that LSU is a place he should have been, never should have gone to the Dolphins, and then he didn't really want to be at Alabama. He wanted to be at LSU, but LSU wasn't available, so he had to coach it out at Alabama, even though he knows that LSU is a place he liked way better. And I don't necessarily buy that. I think if, and I don't know Nick Saban, this is my guess. Nick Saban wanted to coach in the Southeastern Conference and saw why it was so attractive from afar. And then once he got into it and saw the types of players that he could recruit at LSU, realized that that's where he wanted to coach. And when he signs Marcus Spears and signs Michael Clayton and coaches Andrew Whitworth and Chad Lavallee, and then Dwayne Bowe and Craig Davis come along, and Joseph Adai is on his team, and you look at the talent that was assembled there, that ultimately Jamarcus Russell was next up, you understand that that's a different level than what you could do at Michigan State and some of the places that he had been previously. And he reached the top of the mountain, and he talked about standing outside Skip Bertman's office and talking to his agent, Jimmy Sexton, who asked him a very simple question. Do you want to be Vince Lombardi or do you want to be Bear Bryant? And Saban said without hesitation, according to him, Bear Bryant. You want to coach college. But the NFL came calling, and that's the highest level. And y'all know how Saban's wired. He had to take on that challenge. And I don't think it took him very long at all to realize I'm not exactly loving this. Yeah, these guys are really good players. Yeah, this is the highest level. It's not like they were terrible in Miami either. But he didn't have a quarterback. And you can't coach the same way in college, in the NFL, as you can in college. You can't just berate pros. And that's the way Saban's always coached. Intense, loud, assertive. It's a way to coach 19-year-olds who understand the chain of command and who's in charge, as opposed to 31-year-old multimillionaires who are going to look at you and go, calm down. So he wanted to go back to the SEC, and Alabama was open. He'd have taken the Georgia job. He'd have taken the Tennessee job. He'd have taken the Auburn job. And he'd have been awesome at all those places. But Alabama was open, and they got him. And I think he very, very much enjoyed his time in Tuscaloosa as the head coach there. I think he thinks it was a wonderful place to reach the peaks that he did and become the greatest college football coach of all time. I also think he thinks highly of LSU. And this is a guess. I wrote this at LouisianaSports.net, and I understand I can't prove this. I think he probably would have rather taken LSU from the ashes and built a 7 national championship behemoth, being the only guy who could ever do that, as opposed to just having his statue next to Gene Stallings and Bear Bryant. Now, Gene Stallings isn't Bear Bryant, we understand. But Bear Bryant and Saban are kind of equals in terms of their accomplishments in two very, very, very different eras. There isn't an equal here at LSU. It's just be him. And when you look at the roster, I put this stat in my column at LouisianaSports.net. The roster Nick Saban left Les Miles had 8 eventual first-round picks on it. That's more than Auburn has had since 2006. It's 2025. He had built a roster so talented that there's no telling what he actually would have done at LSU, considering the fact that the beast he built in Alabama would not have been there. What if the Mike Shula stuff what if Alabama from 2006 through now is what Tennessee was, where they just wandered the wilderness with a huge stadium and a national championship trophy and a crazy passionate fan base, but they just couldn't get the right coach. That could happen at Alabama. And meanwhile, Nick Saban's churning through this. And there just wasn't a lot to stop Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa, but LSU, which he created, did stop him a couple of times. They stopped him in 2019, and theoretically could have stopped him in 2023. Cam Newton stopped him, and a kick 6 stopped him. But there wasn't a lot stopping him, and there wouldn't have been a lot stopping him in Baton Rouge. So I think he understands if he had to do it over again, knowing everything he knows, he would have stayed at LSU. But I don't think that means he was bummed out he had to go coach Alabama. That's the thing that LSU fans would like to hear, but it's not really realistic. And I do think, because I've said this, like from afar and not personally, this is all professional, it's all fan base, it's all sports. Sports are not real life. As far as Nick Saban goes, I detested him at Alabama. Detested him. I hated the fact that he ruined every November for an LSU fan, including me. And it's easy to dislike a guy who seems to be angry and grumpy all the time and treats people poorly on the sideline and isn't always the nicest guy to the media. And that's the easy guy not to like. And I hated him when he was at Alabama. Not personally, I didn't know him, but I hated the head coach at Alabama. And now that that's passed, and now that he's on game day, and now that he talks openly about his time at LSU, and that stuff subsided, I think that the perception or the feeling, not perception, the feeling of Nick Saban down here in Louisiana is different than it was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. It just is. And maybe one day he can come back. I said this in my column, like the 2003 team's 25th anniversary is going to be in 3 years. Maybe that's the day he can walk out there with that team and get the ovation that he deserves. I couldn't give him a ton of credit for creating what LSU was while he was beating our brains in every first week of November. I couldn't. It's too hard. It's too miserable for Leonard Fournette's undefeated team to go over there and just get annihilated. For the team that you had in 2012 that you felt like was super talented, that he came in here and stole it in Tiger Stadium with McCarron and Yeldon. To knock Jaden Daniels off the field in 2023. I can't. That hurts. Now that stuff's gone, and it feels different now. And you hear that sometimes now that he's doing some of these more candid interviews because he doesn't have a team to recruit. It's a different deal. That's it for hour number one. We're back after Sports Center with hour number two, our Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.